"You're stealing from my child," my sister said over the casserole table at our mother's memorial lunch. The church basement smelled like coffee and floor wax. She had two hands on the edge of the table, and the room was quiet enough to hear the metal legs scrape. I didn't answer. I learned that answering her first accusation never helped anything. "My name is Michael Reyes. I am 49, a maintenance supervisor for the county schools, and I live in a small duplex on the south side of Warren Lake with my 16-year-old son, Jonah. My sister is Karina. Most people call her Kari. She is 37, works when it suits her, and has a boy called Nate who is 7 and sharp enough to read a room before the adults do. Our mother, Nora, died in late spring after a short illness that lasted long enough to be called a fight and short enough to feel like someone turned off the lights while we were in the hallway. We buried her on a Thursday. On Saturday, we ate casseroles and told stories about her laugh. On Monday, the envelope from the life insurance company arrived in my mailbox with my name on it, her policy number, and the word beneficiary, printed 3 times in neat black letters. Years ago, after my father died, Mom bought a life insurance policy. She didn't say much about it beyond the basics. She kept paperwork in a green ledger with a broken zipper and brought it to my place once a year so I could scan receipts and help her file things in the right folders. I knew she had listed me and Kari as beneficiaries. I found out only later that she had also named Jonah. He was a baby when she filled out the form. She wanted, in her words, to tuck one little seed into the future for him. Carrie didn't have a child then. Years passed, and Mom never changed the policy. She had a chance to. She knew how. She kept the beneficiary page in a clear sleeve at the front of the ledger, a little flag peeking out of the top. When she needed to look at it, she knew exactly where to put her finger. Kari and I never fit together well, even as kids. I was the quiet one who fixed the leaky hose without being asked and saved my paper route, money in a coffee can under the bed. She was the loud one who declared what was unfair, then took the jelly donuts first and called it justice. After Dad died, Kari found a new speed. She started using phrases like, "we deserve," and "you owe," and she said them like the two words were twins who walked everywhere arm in arm. She borrowed my old Camry for a week and brought it back 2 months later with a second-hand spoiler bolted on and a citation tucked under the wiper. She borrowed Mom's debit card to grab groceries and returned it with 3 charges from a spa in Cedar Ridge. When I told her to stop using Mom like a wallet, she said Mom enjoyed helping her grown children launch. Kari called everything a launch, even when it was just a night out in a dress with a new tag still hanging inside it. In her 20s, she moved back in with Mom for what was supposed to be 3 months after a breakup. It lasted 18. During that time, she opened the store card at a chain that sells glitter and affirmed itself in mirrors. The bill went to Mom's address. Mom paid the first one because she didn't want late fees. After that, the numbers were bigger. When I asked Mom to let the bill sit, she cried into a dish towel and said she couldn't bear the thought of Kari's credit being ruined. Kari used that softness like a handrail. She didn't grab it once. She slid along it for the full length of the hall. Mom was not naive. She made notes. Whenever she wrote a check at Kari's request, she wrote the date, the amount, and the reason inside the green ledger, then tucked the carbon copy behind it. She never called that ledger a ledger. She called it her housekeeping book. When she sold her old Buick to a neighbor's son for a fair price, the cash went into a bank envelope and the receipt went into the housekeeping book. When she covered the deposit on Kari's new apartment, the number went into the book with the words, "Deposit for Kari. She promises to pay back when able." I asked if she expected to see that money again. She smiled the thin smile she used when she was bracing herself and said, "It isn't the money with her. It's the pattern." I'm embarrassed I taught it to her. Mom tried to balance it out with actions that had more spine. She put her house in a transfer on death arrangement that sent it to both of us if she died, because fair is fair in public, even when fair in private is a different math. We sold the house when she moved to a small apartment near the hospital 2 years before the end. We split the proceeds halfway. I put my share into a college account for Jonah and an emergency fund. Kari bought a used SUV she could not afford to maintain and told Facebook she had secured transportation for her small business to consult for boutique owners. The business produced invoices to herself. The SUV died on the side of Pine Road in winter, and Mom paid the tow bill. Kari wronged me in smaller ways and acted like I was making a fuss when I named them. She used me as a reference on a car loan without asking. She told her landlord I would co-sign, then put my name on a willingness letter. She typed herself. She posted a photo of Mom's jewelry box and asked people to vote on which ring she should upcycle into a modern piece, as if our mother were a thrift store. When I told her to take the photo down, she told me I was being controlling. The jokes at my expense at family dinners were constant. When she got pregnant with Nate, she demanded a gender reveal party I was expected to plan. The reveal fizzled when the smoke cannon malfunctioned. She cried and told everyone I didn't care enough to test things in advance. I was the one who stayed late sweeping pink powder off the church lawn while she filmed herself saying, "We did it." The last year of Mom's life cracked some illusions. Mom got pneumonia in January and never fully regained her strength. She started giving away small things to the people she loved so she could see them used. She gave me Dad's tape measure and her mother's quilt. She told me to take Jonah to the county fair, even if she couldn't. She told Kari to choose one ring and leave the rest in the box. Kari argued that as the daughter, she should get more. Mom said no in a tone that was new. It was not harsh. It was final. Kari sulked and did a long post about navigating grief when siblings gatekeep memories, which is a sentence that sounds deep until you put it next to a sink full of dishes someone else is washing. A month before she died, Mom asked me to bring the housekeeping book. We sat at her small kitchen table. The thrift store lamp on the counter gave off clean yellow light. She slid the clear sleeve with the beneficiary page out and put it in front of me. She tapped Jonah's name with one finger. "I did this when he was born," she said. "I meant it. I still mean it." Then she said the thing I have replayed 100 times. "If Kari wants to be mad," she said, "she can be mad at me, not you. I know what I gave her when nobody was looking. If I had Nate now, I'd be paying twice." She flipped a few pages back and showed me the list of checks, small and large, over the past 10 years with Kari's name in the note line. I recognized some. I didn't know all of them. Mom didn't collect these for a court case. She collected them to keep herself honest. "If she asks," Mom said, "tell her I love her. Then show her the numbers. I don't want you taking the fall for my boundary." Mom died on a Tuesday. Kari called me once at midnight and once at 5 in the morning with questions I couldn't answer about the afterlife. On Wednesday, I handled the death certificates, the funeral home, the flowers. Kari handled Instagram. On Thursday, we buried Mom next to Dad in the old part of Street Martins. On Saturday, we ate casseroles and brownies in the basement and listened to Mr. Alvarez tell a story about the time Mom argued her way out of a parking ticket because she was teaching him to drive and the cop could hear his calf shaking on the brake. People laughed the right way. We washed dishes. Kari pulled me aside and hissed that she had checked the safe and the beneficiary page looked wrong. I told her the page looked the way our mother signed it. On Monday, the envelope from the insurance company arrived. The payout would be split 3 ways: me, Kari, and Jonah. I called the number on the letter, not because I doubted the math, but because I liked to hear a human voice say the words. They explained what was already printed in neat language I could understand. I drove to Kari's place that afternoon with a bag of Nate's school supplies I had ordered before everything fell apart. She opened the door in a robe, let me in without moving a pile of laundry, and asked if I had the check. I told her it hadn't arrived yet, but the designation was me, her, and Jonah. She said nothing for a beat, then started a speech about fairness in children and what Mom would have wanted. I told her I had spoken to Mom about it. She asked what Mom had said. I said Mom wanted it like this. Kari's face went red in patches. She told me that I was taking food out of Nate's mouth, I told her I had just set 3 months of grocery money on her counter in the shape of gift cards and shelf-stable food, because I knew this week would be hard for anyone's budget. She moved the bag with the back of her hand like it might stain the counter. Then she said the line she used at the memorial lunch 2 days later. I was stealing from her child. After that, Carrie turned the volume up to where the speakers distorted. She called me selfish. She called me heartless. She called me a horrible uncle. She called cousins and said I was keeping Mom's money from a 7-year-old. She called Aunt Lila, who always chooses the last person who spoke to her as the person who is right, and said I had convinced Mom to cut Nate out. She texted that she would cut me out of the family forever if I didn't give part of my share to Nate. She sent a photo of Nate holding a stuffed bear with a caption about teaching him how cruel adults can be. The photo made me angrier than anything she said, because she used his face as a hammer. Families started taking sides, the way people do, when they don't have facts and don't want to go looking. A few told me to share because it's what Mom would have wanted. Others told me to keep it because Mom made her choice. The pastor told me to take my time and remember that loving someone doesn't mean funding their disaster. Aunt Lila called to say she knew for a fact Mom had planned to update the policy. I asked how she knew. She said she could just feel it. Feeling it is not the same as a form with a signature. I tried to give myself 1 week to grieve before the fight sucked up every inch of the room, and I failed. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach clenched. I blocked Kari one afternoon and then unblocked her an hour later because I didn't want to miss a message about Nate's school pickup or a real emergency. Blocking someone you share a mother with feels like holding your breath and trying to fix a leak at the same time. I kept the housekeeping book close. I carried it in a tote bag like I was guarding a small animal. There were old hurts underneath all of this. When I was 20 and needed $500 to fix the transmission on the Camry, Mom gave it to me on the condition that I pay it back in 2 months. I did it in 6. I had saved the receipt because I wanted to see the number go back down to 0. Carrie brought that up as proof that I had needed Mom as much as she did. She did not bring up the once-a-month spa me until Friday calls she made for years. She did not bring up the time she used Mom's name to get internet hooked up at an apartment she didn't live in for more than 4 weeks. She did not bring up the $2,400 Mom paid to settle a debt that would have ruined her credit, because Kari forgot to cancel a gym membership after she moved. The escalation started with small tests and moved to louder ones. Kari called and said she had stopped by Mom's apartment to help clean and wanted to know where the jewelry box key was. I told her to put the box down and wait for me. She said she would take the box to keep it safe. I said the box stays in Mom's dresser until we go through it together. She said I was being paranoid. I drove over. The box was already in her trunk. I asked for it back. She told me to stop being dramatic. I asked again. She cried, loud, in the parking lot. I stood beside her car while people carrying groceries turned their heads. She handed me the box. I carried it back upstairs and put it under the bed, and felt like a man who just moved a fire from one part of the kitchen to another. The next week, she tried to get me to sign a gift letter. She wrote up saying I intended to share my portion of the policy with Nate. She told me to be a real man and do the right thing. I told her the right thing was to honor our mother's written choices. She said Mom had been confused. I said Mom put her finger on Jonah's name and told me exactly what she wanted. Kari said Mom had loved Nate more. The words made me cold. Loving someone more is not a thing our mother practiced. She loved us differently, and that difference sometimes looked like discipline for one and gentleness for the other. Kari mistook gentleness for a blank check and discipline for favoritism. I left her apartment shaking and sat in the car with my forehead on the steering wheel until the feeling passed. I decided then I would not do this in corners where she set the lighting. I wanted one room, one time, with witnesses. I wanted to put our mother's voice in the air once and stop being the only person holding it. I called Pastor Joe and asked if we could use the church hall for an hour on a Saturday afternoon. He said of course. I called Aunt Lila and Uncle Bob and my cousins and told them I was going to read a letter, Mom left in her housekeeping book. I called the bank manager, a woman named Denise, who had known Mom since she opened her first savings account. I told Denise I didn't want legal advice. I wanted one sentence people could understand. She said if someone asked a question that had a simple answer, she would answer it. I texted Carrie and told her we were meeting to close up Mom's apartment and to say goodbye to the last of the casserole dishes. I did not call it a meeting about the policy. If I had, she might have turned up with a rented microphone. Friday night, I pulled the housekeeping book onto the kitchen table and opened to the tab Mom had marked beneficiaries. Behind the beneficiary page was an envelope with my name written on it in her neat hand. I hadn't seen it before. I sat there with my finger under the flap for a minute, because I did not know if what was inside would help or break something that still needed the illusion of being whole. I opened it. The letter was short. It said what she had told me at the table a month earlier, that she put Jonah on the policy when he was born and decided not to add any future grandchildren, because she didn't want to build a fight into the form. It said she had given Kari more help than I feel good about when I lay down at night, and she was settling with herself by leaving the policy as is. It asked me not to engage in a shouting match. It told me to show the numbers if I needed to, and then to stop. She signed it with the line she always used when she wanted to remind me she saw me accurately. You love people steady, Michael. Don't let anyone talk you into loving them dumb. Saturday came. We met at the church hall. I brought the housekeeping book and a small box with a few things of Mom's to offer to family who wanted a piece of her to carry home. A measuring spoon set, a dish towel with a rooster, a framed picture of the lake. Carrie arrived 10 minutes late in sunglasses big enough to be called a shield. She gave me a kiss on the cheek that didn't touch skin and asked if the check had come. I told her we were here to talk about Mom, not the mail. We sat in a circle of metal chairs. Pastor Joe opened with a prayer that sounded like him and not like a script. He asked for patience. He asked for clarity. He asked for mercy for all of us, because grief makes people stupid. Then he stepped back and let me speak. I read Mom's letter out loud. I put the beneficiary page on the table. I put a photocopy of the page next to it. I said I was going to read numbers from the housekeeping book, and then we were going to stop. I read the list of checks Mom had written for Kari over 10 years. 600 for rent when a boyfriend left, 400 for the boutique pop-up fee, 400 for that gym membership settlement, 900 for new tires, 30 for loan to Kari to catch up on bills, 200 here and there again. I did not read dates like an accountant. I read them like a person naming weights. Kari cut in twice to say she would have paid it all back if Mom hadn't died. I didn't answer. I turned a page. Denise from the bank spoke once. Someone asked if the policy could be changed after Mom died. She said Nav. Someone asked if the company could add a child who wasn't listed. She said Nav. Someone asked if Mom had discussed the policy with her. She said she couldn't discuss private conversations, but she could say Mom had always been careful with her forms and had not been confused about where to sign her name. Kari tried to make the room about fairness. She said, what about what Mom would have wanted if she had met Nate after he started spelling his name? She said Mom had favored the older branch of the family and that I had taken advantage of her mother's confusion. I put both my hands on my knees and took one deep breath. I told the room that I was not here to convince anybody of anything. I was here to honor exactly what Mom wrote. Then I said the only thing I planned to offer outside of the policy, I would set aside a portion of my share to fund a small education account in Nate's name, controlled by an independent custodian who was not me and not Carrie, to be used for school expenses only when he turned 18. I would not give Carrie cash. I would not feed a fire. I would buy the boy a book, a class, an instrument, a test fee. I said it calmly. I asked Pastor Joe to hold the letter I had written to the custodian in case it needed to be shown later. Then I closed the housekeeping book. The room didn't clamp. It rested. And Lila looked at me, at the letter, at the list of checks, and at Carrie. She said she hadn't known the numbers. Carrie said Mom had intended to change the policy and hadn't gotten around to it. Pastor Joe said intent is what you write down and sign. Denise nodded because that is how banks survive. After the meeting, Kari stormed to the corner with her phone. I assumed she would post something about bullies in church basements. Instead, she called me back to the table and demanded again that I split the money and give her half of my share. I told her no. She told me I was dead to her. I said I loved her and I didn't owe her the answer she wanted. She left in a rush that knocked 2 chairs over. Uncle Bob stood on one of the chairs to make a joke about this family staying in shape, and people laughed more than they should have. Relief has a strange sound. It can sound like a bad joke saved by timing. The check came the next week. I deposited Jonah's portion into his account and my portion into mine with the same serious look I used when I got my first paycheck at 16. I set up the education account for Nate with the portion I had offered, named the independent custodian, and moved on. I did not send Kari the paperwork. I told her only that I had done what I said I would do. She told me she would see me in court. I told her the policy didn't go to court. She asked if I really thought anyone would pick me over a child. I didn't answer. It is possible to be right and still lose people, and I was ready to lose anyone I had to in order not to betray Mom. Kari did try to make it a public crusade. She posted a long note about a brother who hid behind paperwork to hurt a little boy. She said I had stolen from a child. She said Mom had been coerced by her golden son. People who had never met us liked the post. A neighbor of Mom's commented that she remembered me pushing Kari's car out of a snowbank in January, while Kari filmed from the porch. A woman who knew us from Little League wrote that people often mistake boundaries for cruelty. Kari deleted those comments and left the rest. I stopped reading. It would be satisfying to say that this is where my revenge ended. The neat room with the letter, the lined-up numbers, the child's future protected from his mother's hands. It would also be dishonest. Revenge, when it's clean, is not a shout. It's a refusal. It's a measured transfer of power back to where it belonged. Kari found a new angle. She called a family meeting at Aunt Lila's to clear the air. She said she wanted to talk about dividing Mom's keepsakes. Mom had already left us a list, but I went because I didn't want to be accused of hiding from difficult conversations. When I walked in, there was no list on the table. There was a phone propped on a cup recording video. Kari sat down with her hands folded and said she was ready to forgive me if I apologized, and gave Nate half of my share of the policy. She used the word forgive like a fishing hook. I told her we weren't doing this. I stood up. She asked if I cared more about money than family. I said I cared more about honoring our mother than about winning a fight. She slammed the table. The phone fell, and Lila picked it up and turned it off. That was the last time I went to a meeting I didn't call myself. There were smaller skirmishes after that. Kari showed up at Jonah's basketball game and tried to corner me against the bleachers. I walked away. She left me a voicemail listing everything she had done for Mom in the last month, as if a month erases 10 years. I didn't call back. She told anyone who would listen that I was hoarding money. I asked the bank to add alerts to my account and learned to ignore numbers that weren't on my screen. If you were waiting for the nuclear part, it came sideways. I didn't plan it. Kari didn't. She tried to sell 2 of Mom's rings to a pawn shop in Eastbrook. She thought they were the ones Mom had told her to take. They were not. Mom had written the list of who gets what on the inside of the ring box lid. Kari hadn't bothered to read it. The pawnbroker knew Mom. He called me because my number was in Mom's ledger on a sticky note for emergency contacts. I drove down with the housekeeping book in the lid. I didn't yell. I showed the lid. I showed the date Mom had given the ring to me for safekeeping with the note for Jonah's future. The pawnbroker handed the rings back to me. Kari called me names in the parking lot. I handed her the ring that was hers. I didn't make a speech. I went home and put Jonah's ring in a safe deposit box at the bank because I was done keeping treasure in a closet where anyone could open the door. Word got around, not because I told it loudly, but because pawn shops talk and families listen when money crosses a counter. People who had been soft on Carrie stopped co-signing her version. She felt the room cool and tried a new tactic. She texted a photo of Nate's backpack with a tear and asked if I could help with a new one for his little shoulders. I bought the backpack and had it shipped to her place with a gift receipt. She texted the next week asking for money for her phone bill because a mother shouldn't have to choose between service and food. I sent a box of groceries. She didn't thank me. That's fine. I wasn't sending thanks. I was sending food. Summer turned to fall. Jonah started his junior year. I took a second shift when the auditorium needed its seats rebolted and used the overtime to pay for his driver's ed class. Kari moved apartments again and sent out a new address with a note about fresh starts. I didn't send a plant. I did send Mom's rooster towel to a cousin who had asked for it at the church hall but felt bad about speaking up. Some inheritances are better small. And Lila came around in her own way. She stopped sending me links to articles about mothers' hearts and started sending me photos of recipes she was trying. One afternoon, she asked if I would stop by to look at a squeaky door. I brought a can of oil and took 10 minutes to fix it. When I stood up, she had tears in her eyes. She said she had prayed for a scene at the church hall and had gotten a record instead. She told me she had wanted to slap both of us since we were small and felt grateful Mom hadn't raised her hand as often as we deserved. She laughed. I laughed. Sometimes grief lets you laugh without feeling like a traitor to the dead. The twist came not with a bang, but with a letter from the insurance company in late November. There had been a small secondary policy Mom had forgotten about, one she used to pay through her old job. It wasn't much, but it existed, and the beneficiaries were listed the same way. The company had found it while closing the file. The letter said checks would be issued to me, to Kari, and to Jonah. I had a decision to make. The part of me that wanted to win wanted to hold that letter in my hand until it was warm, deposit the check, and say nothing. The part of me that remembered the way Mom tapped Jonah's name with her finger wanted to use the letter to finish something she started. I called Pastor Joe and asked if I could have 5 minutes at the Christmas potluck to say thank you to the church for the casseroles and the quiet room they had given us. He said, of course. I called Denise to make sure nothing I planned would insult the policy or step on the company's rules. She laughed and told me thank you speeches were not regulated. I called Jonah and asked if he would mind standing with me for a minute at the microphone. He said he would prefer not to speak. I told him he wouldn't have to. The potluck was full of ham and frosting and paper angels cut by fourth graders. I stood at the microphone, said thank you, and then said I had learned something about how a person can love their family without letting them spend her from the grave. I held up the letter and told the room that Mom had listed the same beneficiaries on a smaller policy and that the company had just sent notice. I said I would be depositing Jonah's portion into his account, as Mom intended. I said my portion would stay with me, as Mom intended. Then I said the last part that Kari wasn't ready for. I would be donating a portion of this smaller policy in Mom's name to the church's emergency fund, the one that helps with rent and power bills and grocery cards, because Mom had used her life to patch holes quietly, and this seemed like the right translation of her work into the future. I said the donation would be listed on the board with her name in the words, in honor of steady love. I did not look at Kari. I looked at the board. There's a clean kind of quiet a room makes when a decision lands. It happened then. People didn't applaud. They nodded. Pastor Joe put his hand on my shoulder. Mr. Alvarez cried. Jonah stood still like a small tree in a strong wind and then breathed. I put the letter away. Denise, who was there with her kids eating cookies, said I had handled the only account that matters, the one you keep with yourself. Kari left early without saying goodbye. She posted a photo later of Nate in front of a light display with a caption about learning who your family is when money shows up. It got likes. I didn't check who pressed the button. By spring, the air had changed. Kari still tried to get traction with certain cousins. She still told people I had stolen from a child. The difference was that the child's name wasn't useful to her anymore. Nate got a new backpack when he needed it. He got soccer cleats. He will get books and fees paid when he's older, whether Kari thanks me or not. That part is not revenge. That part is an adult promise I made in a church hall with a letter on a table. The revenge, if you need the word, is this. Kari's favorite room is the room where people think she was wronged. She lost that room. She lost it because our mother wrote down her choices, and because I put those choices where everyone could see them at once, and because I refused to pretend the numbers didn't exist. I didn't ruin her with a speech. I didn't drag her to court. I didn't write a novel about her faults. I executed a simple plan that kept the policy intact, protected the kids, and starved the stories she wanted to eat for the next 10 years. There is a version of this where I share to keep the peace. In that version, Kari spends my share as fast as hers, posts a photo of a new sectional, and calls it a blessing. I spend the next decade resenting a decision I made to get people off my back. My mother's boundary becomes my weakness, and I teach Jonah the wrong lesson about how love works. I chose the other version. It is quieter. It is lonelier some nights. It lets me sleep. On the 1 year anniversary of Mom's death, Jonah and I drove to Street Martin's with a small bouquet of grocery store flowers and a thermos of hot chocolate. We stood by the stone and read the dates and said nothing, because nothing needed talking to death beyond the usual weather report. On the way back to the car, Jonah asked if I regretted any of it. I told him I regretted that his grandmother had to write a letter to protect us from each other. I told him I didn't regret honoring it. I told him boundaries aren't a lack of love. They are a shape love can fill without spilling everywhere. He nodded the way teenage boys nod when they are listening and pretending not to. We stopped at the Harbor Diner on Main and split a slice of apple pie. Denise from the bank was in a booth with her kids. She waved. Pastor Joe came in for coffee and sat for 5 minutes and told us a story about Mom asking him to hold back 3 dozen bulletins one Sunday because she wanted to teach the ladies' route to fold them straight. He laughed. We laughed. The pie was too sweet and just right. On the way out, I put a 20 in the jar by the register that says Community Meals because it makes me feel useful. The jar has Mom's name on a little plaque now, in honor of steady love. Kari hates that plaque. She told someone it was me claiming Mom like a brand. She misunderstands most things. That's not my problem to fix anymore. They're practical notes, if you like those. Keep receipts. Keep your parents' forms where you can find them. Make copies. Tell the truth once in a room with witnesses. Protect children directly when you can. Don't turn your life into a reply. But the real note is this. When a person tells you you're stealing from a child because you refuse to surrender a boundary their own mother drew, don't put your wallet on the table to prove you care. Put the page with your mother's signature on it and the list of what she already covered for the one who's yelling. Then close the book. Then go home and do something kind that you don't have to post. Then take your son for pie. Then sleep. Kari and I don't talk much now. When we do, it is about Nate's game schedule or a school fundraiser. It is short, it is functional. It is not warm. That's all right. Not every sibling story ends with a porch swing and iced tea. Some end with a ledger in a bank box, a boy who knows his father didn't fold, and a mother's handwriting on a piece of paper we keep in a sleeve so it won't fade. I open that sleeve once in a while to remind myself that I did not make this up. I didn't push anybody. I didn't steal anything. I held a line a woman I loved asked me to hold. It feels like revenge if you happen to be the person who wanted me to drop it. To me, it feels like breathing. When Nate turns 18, I'll send him a letter with the account details and a simple line that says, "This came from your grandmother, through me." He can choose whether to say thank you. He can choose whether to let his mother hold the letter or keep it in his own pocket. I hope he keeps it. I hope he buys books that make his head hurt in a good way. I hope, if he has a son one day, he teaches him the same thing I taught mine. Love without a boundary is not love. It's a leak. And the person who fixes leaks is allowed to point at the shut-off valve and say, "That's where it is. That's where it stays." If I ever hear Carrie tell someone I stole from her child again, I will not answer. The answer is written down already, in a handwriting that can be identified without a single witness. It's the only voice in the room that matters. I carry it with me. I let it do the talking. Then I go back to my own house, where the sink is clean, the lights turn off when I touch the switch, and the boy I'm responsible for is saving for whatever comes next. That is the shape of my revenge. It looks like a life that holds,